Jai Shri Ram, happy Onam to all of the Malayalis out there that are celebrating this holiday. Apparently, it lasts for about 10 days, and I think we're in the seventh or eighth day of it right now. So I hope all that goes well and you eat a lot of food and, do whatever other kinds of observances that happen during this holiday. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because of basically two reasons. One, in the discourse when it comes to politics, this specific holiday is being used because of the fact that it's native to Kerala, which is, of course, ridden with an enormous population of minorities, both Muslims and Christians. And, we have all this long history of left rule there and so on that has caused an enormous amount of problems in that once great state. And so I basically see two things in the discourse here. One is some people who are pushing the kind of Dalit politics angle that claim that this is about, Brahminical patriarchy being fought against by some kind of, lower caste resurgent force and all of this kind of narrative that they have with one of the mythological stories behind why this is a significant holiday. That's one thing. The second thing, which is the actual focal point of why I want to talk about it, is that we're increasingly seeing all of these claims that Onam is not a Hindu holiday. It's actually just a Malayali holiday for the people of Kerala, whether they're Muslims, Christians, or Hindus, and it's not really a Hindu holiday. Now, there are many pro-Hindu sources online that will tell you why that's all nonsense and it is a Hindu holiday and explain the different mythological significances that go into making what Onam is. So that I'm not trying to explain what that is. The reason that this is important is because increasingly, whenever you see any of these messages put out there, no matter how inaccurate it is or how off base it is, or how ridiculous it seems to normal people, some number of people buy into it, and then over time, as the message gets kind of propagated more and more people buy into it. Now, if you try to do research on Onam, just looking at English language sources, other than those pro-Hindu sources that I had mentioned, you will find some kind of leftist sources or anti-Hindu forces saying the Hindu nationalists are trying to co-opt it as just a Hindu holiday where really it's a Malayali holiday and so on, which is, this is a great strength of the enemy, the ideological enemy, that first they take something that you have and kind of co-opt it and misinterpret it. Then secondly, they kind of preempt your attempts to reclaim it and to explain what it actually is by saying, anybody who tries to give you this narrative, they're just Hindutwavadi, they're just saffron, they're just this and that, so that people who are maybe not really knowledgeable or people who are apolitical and don't really understand what's going on in the grander picture of things for the Hindus, they'll start to buy into it more and more. Now, as I've mentioned several times, I was born and raised here in the United States. Now, in the United States, because it's a traditionally Christian culture, Christmas is the most important holiday that's celebrated here. Now, Christmas, of course, has origins in pagan Europe. There's all these, sun worship related, winter solstice related festivals that used to occur in pagan Europe prior to conversion to Christianity. And there was also European pagan practices that they co-opted, like cutting down a tree and bringing it into your home, decorating a tree with ornaments, having a Yule log that's part of the festivities. All of the various traits of Christmas and Christmas celebrations, none of them actually come from Christianity. They all come from European paganism, and they were co-opted by the Christians in their conversion because they felt like average people are going to take to Christianity more easily if we can kind of make them feel like they're not really losing out on their culture and customs that they have been practicing since time immemorial. So that's something that you can also read about in doing research and so on and so forth. But the reason that this is important is two reasons. One, it shows you that the origin of a holiday or the origin of certain rituals and practices, those can become co-opted to such a degree where people don't even know that that is the case, know about the origins, I mean. People are not even aware of the origins unless they do research, because anyone that talks to you about what I just said, the pagan origins of various practices in Christmas, they weren't taught that from a young age. They came to know about that because of research that they did and being exposed to sources that did research and wanted to spread this awareness. So we should always be aware of the fact that even though we may have come up with something and pushed this tradition and held on to it for generations and generations, that doesn't mean that it can't be taken away from us, as many, many things throughout time were taken away from people that created them by the Christians, and also by the Muslims as well. They've done a lot of that too, but they're much more interested in just kind of crushing and divorcing people from those kinds of practices, where Christians seem to be much more into trying to co-opt them, but that's a huge tangent. The other reason that I wanted to talk about Christmas is that even after it became co-opted by the Christians, it became a Christian religious holiday. In much more recent times in history, we have seen that Christmas has become basically a meaningless holiday centered around consumerism, which, if you've ever lived in the United States, is very, very obvious to you because of one, Hindus here that I've come across, the majority of them, unless they're really kind of Kattar, Bhagwa Pilled kind of Hindus, they celebrate Christmas to some degree. I mean, they may not buy a tree and have a bunch of ornaments, but they oftentimes they do buy a tree and have ornaments and things like that. They'll give gifts. This is a very, very common thing among second-generation Hindus here, and even first-generation Hindus here that have been here for a while, which is, of course, very unfortunate. My family doesn't do it, but my cousins' parents do it. My aunt and uncle do it, and many of the Hindus that I've met here do this as well. Which, again, like I say, it's unfortunate, but it's something that happens. And we also see that even in India, people who are not Christians are celebrating Christmas and having all of this, Santa Claus and stockings, so on and so forth. But here in the U.S., and I think this is also true in the Western world in general, but I've never lived in Europe, I've never lived in Australia or whatever, but Christmas is basically seen as a holiday where in the lead up to Christmas, you have to buy a bunch of gifts for a bunch of people, some of whom you actually care about, some of whom, because of social obligations, you're supposed to give them gifts on these gift-giving holidays. They're supposed to give you gifts on these gift-giving holidays. You'll see ads for new cars that show people driving in snow with these giant red bows on the grill of their car because there's some kind of special deal for Christmas time and all of this kind of a thing. We also see this thing called Black Friday, which is the day after Thanksgiving, which is a basically patriotic kind of holiday here in America. And this takes place roughly a month before Christmas. And that day is a big shopping day here because there's all these sales that happen for people trying to get Christmas gifts. So the basic point that I'm trying to make is Christmas, these Christmas festivities, it started out as pagan, having all of these deep spiritual, cultural roots in European paganism, mostly in Norse paganism. Then it became co-opted by the Christians and became a Christian religious holiday with a kind of veneer and structure of Christian ideals surrounding the birth of Jesus, even though there's no reason at all to believe that he was born around Christmas time. So that's another intermediate phase. Then it even becomes kind of cheapened from that level to just a consumerist holiday. So this is something that has happened to other people's traditions. It's something that has happened to other holidays. So we shouldn't think that just because we are seeing the co-opting of Onam being not really a Hindu holiday, or being a, just a Keralite holiday, or being a, Dalit celebration of this and that, or whatever the case may be, um, just because we're starting to see that now in the last generation or generation and a half, that doesn't mean that the way that we look at it now is going to be the way that people look at it in the future, because narratives change over time, and once they change, you can't recapture something that has been lost. And I wanted to leave you all with this. In India, we of course see that in the last maybe 10 or 15 years or so, you're seeing people celebrating Valentine's Day. And for basic Hindu kind of socially conservative reasons, you're seeing people push back against it, which I support. I think Valentine's Day is generally very negative, so people not celebrating Valentine's Day, I think, is a great thing. But what is also interesting is that even Valentine's Day had this same thing happen to it. So if you've ever wondered why it's called Valentine's Day, it's named after Saint Valentine. In the Catholic Church and also the Orthodox Christian churches, they have feast days for different saints. So these are real people that lived sometime after Jesus, who, they lived some pious Christian life, and then they became seen as a saint. People credited them for miracles. They pray in their name, and all of these kinds of things happen. And so this person, Valentine, Saint Valentine, he was the patron saint of a couple different things, including happy marriages. So if you're not familiar with saints, they have a patronage of various things. And so it's kind of like a department that you go to them in order to pray for very specific things. If people are trying to make a Hindu connection, people will try to claim, well, it's akin to, Lakshmi is associated with wealth, and X god is associated with X thing. It's, of course, very different from that, but from the point of view of people who are just trying to pray for some materialistic thing, it's basically the same. Obviously, the philosophical underpinnings are totally different, but the day-to-day practice that people have are very similar. And so the way that Valentine's Day originally was, when it was celebrated as a Catholic feast day for St. Valentine, was basically just to try to strengthen marriages, that people who were married in a traditional way, without modern dating, without premarital sex, without divorce, having very kind of traditional, socially conservative, patriarchal views towards marriage, that they would celebrate this holiday, the feast day of St. Valentine, in a religious, spiritual kind of a way, and it was to strengthen the social ties that existed in marriage. Now, obviously, as the society has become more liberal, more pro-feminism, less patriarchal, more secular, more materialistic, and more consumerist, all of those things have been totally stripped away, and now it's just an excuse for people to, engage in these kinds of so-called romantic behaviors, and it's also a reason for jewelry companies and chocolate companies and wine companies to make more money on this particular day. So, just like Christmas has been totally cheapened and co-opted and changed from what it originally was, and even Valentine's Day was cheapened and co-opted and changed from what it originally was, let's be very aware of the fact that this is something that can happen to holidays, and we shouldn't kind of sit back and just laugh at these people trying to form this narrative and say that they're dumb and they're wrong, because they have the ability to change the narrative over time. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Jai Shri Ram.